Welcome to Home Education Matters, the weekly podcast supporting you on your home education journey. Hello and welcome to another episode of Home Education Matters, and today is our final episode in the Parenting with Possibilities series that we have been doing with Sareeta Pattni, and it has been really an enjoyable series for me. I've loved every minute of it, and today we are kind of slightly bringing it full circle back to our first episode, which was talking about how important it is to be able to express your emotions in a very honest and raw way, both with your children and receiving the emotions of your child. And today, Sareeta and I thought that we would talk about the healthy expression of anger, although there's a lot to unpack there, and we may segue off into all sorts of different things, but that is the plan today, is it not, Sareeta?
Yeah, thank you, Eleanor. And when you say that, it's such a big topic. Something that's really alive for me at the moment is just how, as a woman and also as a girl growing up, it was really just never okay for me to be angry. And I remember feeling anger and also witnessing the people around me being angry, and it was every time it was almost like it was okay for the adults, and really it was okay for the men more than the women. Like my dad would get angry and my mum wouldn't have these loud outbursts. It was more of the passive aggressive kind of way, which at the time I didn't think was anger, but now I know it was just coming out in a different way. And I remember sometimes having outbursts myself, and it was really just not okay. You know, my mum was just always telling me, like, you can't be angry. It's just not okay. And it was really confusing for me as a child. And then as I grew up, and as most people can probably relate, the teenage years, there's a lot of rage. And so that for me was, you know, I was kind of having these outbursts again, and painfully they were directed at my mum. I remember having many kind of battles with her, and it felt very uncontrollable, but also I felt so incredibly guilty every time I was angry and or had an interaction with her like that, like so guilty and so sad. And really this, what was going on inside me was, there's something wrong with me. Why can't I control this? Why can't I stop it? Yeah, and then I had children, and it felt like that cycle again. Like I would get annoyed or irritated or angry and snap. And so I kind of felt like I was this balloon almost, and you know, it would fill up, fill up, fill up, and then I would hold it in, hold it in, hold it in, and then suddenly it would take the tiniest thing to pop the balloon, and then there'd be this explosion. And the same cycle again. I'd have this outburst, and then I would feel guilty and sad, and yeah, it's like the same cycle repeating itself, where I it's not okay to be angry, so I keep pushing it down, I keep holding it in, keep inflating that balloon to contain it, and then it just explodes, and then it's really the smallest thing that bursts the balloon, and there's this huge eruption, and then I go into the cycle of guilt, and then the balloon's back again, and I start filling it up, and yeah, that was really the cycle that's been happening. Yeah.
Do you think that the way to break out of that anger, guilt, shame cycle, which I think a lot of women listening to this, a lot of people listening to this will really relate to, do you think that there's a way to break out of that cycle in a healthy way?
Yes, and that's exactly what I'm discovering, I'm researching, I'm exploring right now, is how. And And the first thing is really to allow myself to express it, to really consciously allow myself to be angry. And so when I say consciously, that means I do something called the 333 practice. And this is 3 minutes of rage 3 times a week for 3 months. So 333. And that is, you set a time. And so I put a timer on my phone, I go into a room, and I make sure that I'm not going to hurt myself, I'm not going to hurt anybody else, I'm not going to get arrested. And I allow myself to just rage. And it could be screaming into a pillow, it could be, twisting a towel, it could be hitting the towel on the bed, like, really whatever it is. It could be banging my feet, it could be screaming, and just really allowing myself to express the rage that is just bottling up. And rather than keep it in that balloon that I was talking about, it's really just this conscious way of releasing it, and really doing it like this is, I'm creating a space, I'm creating a time to express my anger. And that's conscious, because the unconscious is when you've kind of built it, you contained it, and then somebody says, can you wash this bowl for me? And then it's the eruption. I'm not a maid, I don't want to wash a bowl. That story. And that's unconscious anger. That's when someone will say something and you're triggered, and then there's an explosion. And it really could be the smallest thing, like someone could leave a sock in the wrong place, or not take the rubbish out, and that could cause a really like an overreaction, a reaction that's not proportionate to the action. When you have it and you can't explain it, and this whole avalanche of stuff just falls out of your mouth, and it was really just a tiny thing. And I often look back and think, gosh, like, why was I so angry? It was such a small thing, but it was never really that thing. It was all the build-up that led to it. And so this 333 practice is allowing me to feel my anger rather than hold it in till it gets to that really high point. And what it's helping me to do is lower something called my numbness bar, because what's happening is that because of these strategies that I have, and many of us have, is we push this feeling away, and so we numb ourselves, and our numbness bar is really high. And so when small things are making us feel a little bit like we feel anger about it, we don't do anything, and then we collect the small things, and then those small things build up. And so the small things could be, someone didn't put their shoes on the bed, like where the shoes are meant to go, and you're angry, but you pick them up and you put them away, and inside you're like, oh, I had to do that. And then the next thing is you find someone's socks on the floor, and again you're like, oh, I really wish people would put their socks away, but oh, here I am again, I will do it. And then you put the socks away, and then throughout your day you don't say anything, and then it starts building up. But when you notice that you're angry about it, you see the shoes, and then you can say, hey, you didn't put your shoes on the shelf, and will you do it? And so then you're using your anger to say what you notice, and to ask for what you want, which is, some people take responsibility for their shoes. And then you would see the socks, and then you could say, hey, you didn't put your socks away, will you put them in the washing basket? And when you are sensing the low level of anger and using it to create what you want, you're not building this up, because then the socks, and then it's very clear, someone can say yes or no, and then that opens up a whole other part of it. And then that really takes me into the next part of this anger thing, which, especially with children, is the yes and the no. And one thing that I discovered is I expect my children to say yes a lot, and when they say no, it's really hard to hear that as a parent. And that was because I wasn't allowed to say no. And so it's really just, using and realizing that we use our anger to not just say no. So it's also to say yes. And so it's really about, yeah, working with that. And so I've been doing these little practices of practicing saying yes and no to my children and hearing their yeses and nos as well. And how is that for me? So making an invitation and they say no, and then me wanting to, oh, that's uncomfortable. Why is that? And really, yeah, and actually using it as a way to then negotiate and say, okay, well, I don't always want to be the one that picks up your shoes and your socks. So what are we going to do about it?
I have a lot of questions. While you've been talking, I've been writing down so many questions because I have so many questions on this. I think my biggest question is this. How does going into a room on your own and externalizing in a slightly uncontrolled but kind of semi-controlled way, externalizing your anger in the form of screaming into a pillow, like hidden stuff, that kind of what we would generally consider to be an expression of anger. How does that then relate to this much more contained, action-based, reflective response when your children like leave their crap around the house and you're like, here we go again. I can feel anger rising. Okay, I'd really like it if you could put your stuff away. What are we going to do about this? They feel like really different things to me. They feel like almost like expressions of almost something different, or it's being expressed in such a different way that I'm struggling to see how they relate to each other.
Gosh, that's a really good question. So my experience is that by doing this 333 practice, it's reconnected me to the feeling of anger. And what it's done is it's decluttered my emotional body of all this anger that's just been building up. And actually, when I say decluttered, it's not done. Like, I'm still going with this practice because it feels like there's a lot in there. I'm 42 years old, and I could say for the last 41 years, it's only in the last year that I've been doing this work that I've shifted. And up until then, it was really not okay to be angry. So there's all this build up, and not all of it is mine. It comes from society, and it really is not okay. It's really not okay to raise your voice and say what you want or say what you don't want. It's uncomfortable for people, and those are all expressions of anger. And yeah, going into a room, and I don't always close my door. I really want to make that clear. Like, it's really open because I want my children to see that I feel angry, because we see our children having angry outbursts, and you see that a lot with younger children, especially toddlers. And I've been through it. I've had my daughter had real emotional outbursts, and rolling around in the supermarket and things like that. And children are doing it, and there is this idea of, oh, that's a child having a tantrum. And really what's happened is, over the years, we've just learned to contain the tantrum and not express it. And so it's all in there somewhere, and it's packed away, and we've created these survival strategies that it's not okay. And I keep the door open and I tell my children what I'm doing, because I want them to know that they feel it and I feel it too. I'm not this. And it's really, and this comes into this bigger topic that we've touched on before as well. It's just this idea of this new culture that I really want to create for children, where it's not, oh, you're a child and for you it's like this, but for me as an adult it's different. And really, it's not. That's not true. That's a lie, because we all feel all these feelings. It's just, as we grow older, we develop different ways of coping and not expressing and suppressing and holding it in, and they're all strategies so that we will be accepted and fit in somehow. And it really is against the societal norm to express your anger. Like, it's really, yeah, I mean, it's scary for me to even be talking about this, really, because it's so on the edge. It's so on the edge, and it's on the edge for me because I'm also moving onto this new map of what anger can be. And it still comes up for me, when my children are angry. I sometimes do get triggered and want them to stop, or especially if we're in public and, I want to hide it at home. And my question is why? We all feel it, and why? Why do we want to hide it? Why
Do
is it
you
so uncomfortable?
do you feel that by going into another room but leaving the door open, that you're kind of on a spectrum, that you're developing towards something else? Because it sounds to me like when it comes to your children, for example, if they were angry, that might be something you might encourage them to externalize to you or to the person who made them angry. Whereas with yourself, I get the impression that you're kind of semi-externalizing it, in as much as you are allowing them a certain amount of access, but you're still not doing it with them or in front of them. Is that a conscious decision because you actually just don't want to, or is that because you're sort of, like I say, on a spectrum and you're building up to being able to do that, being able to display your anger in front of them? Or do you just feel like actually that's just not really appropriate as a parent to do that?
I think, oh, that's another good question. And I don't want to think, because I really want to feel into the question, is really this, it's, I, so this new map of anger is really about what anger can be. And so this unconscious anger that's destructive, that wants to hurt people, that wants to blame people, is the part that needs healing. And then there's this new map of healing of anger, which is really the anger that creates, the anger that stands up for what you care about, the anger that says yes, the anger that says no, the anger that holds boundaries, the anger that gives you clarity. Really, it's, oh, I have it so clear, I know what I want to do, and this is it. Like, and that's what you can use your anger for. But when you've got it all built up in this toxic way, is when it becomes this destructive force. And what I want to show my children, I don't want to put it in their face, but is that when you don't express it, it can become destructive if you take it out on people. And so I want to show them that there's this way of going through your anger in this way where you're allowing yourself to express it. And I don't always do it alone. Like I have Zoom calls with other people, and we do it together. So we go into, there's like a group that I'm a part of, and I think there's over 500 or 600 people in there, and different people hold space at different times to do a 3-3 practice. So you can be on a Zoom call with 5, 10, 15 other people at a time. And we just come together for a short 15-minute call and do this practice, and we'll have a check-in, have a check-out, and that's it. But it's really this space of when you go through that, what comes afterwards. And so, yeah, leaving the door open is really saying to my children that I'm not hiding it, but I'm not, this is not to you. And I'm not angry with you, or I'm not angry at you. And so they're welcome to come and peek in. And sometimes they do, if they're curious, they want to know what it sounds like, or what I'm doing. And
Aren't you
yeah.
angry at them though? And I mean, because anger generally does have an object, and sometimes we are angry with our children, aren't we? And I wonder how authentic it feels to kind of hold back from expressing that, or expressing it in such a different way that maybe it's not resonating with your anger. Like if we take it out on the pillow, we're not angry with the pillow, we're angry with our children. And is that okay? And at what point is it okay? And how is it okay to express that?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm
And
asking
so,
difficult questions today, I know, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, no, and they're really good questions, because I'm really glad to think of it in this way, and also because I've been doing it for longer, it's making me formulate my journey a bit. So thank you. Yeah, there is this part, and so this opens up like a slightly different topic which still relates, but there is this, you may have heard of it, the Cartman drama triangle, which is you have the rescuer, which is the protector, the perpetrator, and then you have the victim.
Mm.
And so when you're in this state of, you're triggered, so somebody does something and you're angry, so your child does something and you're angry at them, And so you're on this, and when you're angry at someone, you're the perpetrator because you're blaming. You did this, your fault, I'm angry, da da da. Like, and so you're on this triangle of low drama. You're blaming whoever the other person for what you're feeling. And really, when you're blaming someone else for what you're feeling, you also then become the victim, right? You like, poor me, I'm angry because of you. And so really, I'm the victim. I'm the victim of your action. And a huge part of consciously being or consciously using your anger is shifting from this low drama triangle to a place of high drama. And the high drama has three different archetypes there. You have the lover, you have the warrior, and you have the mage. And they use three different feelings. So the lover uses the sadness, the warrior uses the anger, and the mage uses the fear. And the conscious, they use the conscious sadness, anger, and fear.
Mm.
And really, it's as you start doing this work more, what I'm noticing, or yeah, as I've been doing this more, what I'm noticing is that when I'm blaming my children, I I'm a victim of their actions. And really, if I blame them, then I also keep them in this low drama triangle. And what I want to create is this bridge of, and it's there, and it is there for everybody. And I also don't want to pretend it's not there. And so this is really saying that this exists, and I could blame you, but I choose not to. I choose to go through the conscious anger and see what I can create with it. And so really it's taking this, and we'll just take the example of the shoes, you know, children just not leaving their stuff around and it's everywhere. And it's really okay. I'm really angry about it and I can blame them, or I can turn around and I can go through the conscious anger, see that I'm irritated by it, and then think, okay, what do I want to create from here? And then I can make an offer to my children and say, and really have a conversation that comes from my adult self rather than me also being the child. Because that's another thing that happens is when I blame them, I come down to being where they are. I'm another child. You didn't put your toys away. We don't want to, mum, but why not? It's annoying me. Like, and you can see that you're knocking. And actually, this is for us. It's a journey for us as the parents to shift into adulthood, to be the holders of high drama, so that children can see how it can go.
I've got another challenging question for you then.
Yeah.
Because you said that that we become another child, you know, and we start relating on that level of, yeah, but this and yeah, but that, which to me sounds like expressions of anger. And I wonder if it's a bad thing if I sometimes feel that we have a lot to learn from children in the way they express their emotions, because they don't yet have this societal suppression that you detailed at the start of this session. And I wonder whether this idea that you kind of become like the children with this kind of tit for tat, retaliatory, accusatory language, is that a bad thing, or is that just a healthy expression of what we're actually feeling underneath?
I don't think there's anything that's bad or good, actually. I think it's really just noticing that is how it is. And what I've noticed is I see having done this conscious rage work that I've been doing and still doing it, what it's opened me up to is that there's another way that's possible. And so it isn't that one is good and one is bad. It's just that there are two, you have choice. And before I knew this work, I didn't have choice. I really thought this was the only way. And I didn't know that another way was possible.
So you're saying
And
that at times at times it might actually be appropriate to be more classically angry, and then at other, not in a destructive way, but not also necessarily that the constructiveness comes from the expression of anger, as opposed to the constructiveness coming from, okay, my anger is bringing me to the point where I'm able to understand what it is that I'm afraid of here, what it is that I'm wanting here. That there are times when actually just being angry with your child who's angry with you, and you're having a bit of a row back and forth, and then you're all okay again afterwards. Is there a point at which that's actually okay?
And again, I think that it doesn't need to be judgment, like, because and what you're talking about there, for me, what it is, and there's another part of using your anger consciously, is to be the conscious arsehole. And sometimes it's necessary.
I feel
It
like I
really
step
is.
into that role really quite often, so I'm kind of pleased it's got a label. I'll take that label. I might put that on a t-shirt, actually. I quite
Yeah, I
like that.
think it's a great one to put on a t-shirt. And really it's, and if you want an example, I can give you one, which was yesterday. My daughter was trying to stitch, like she's teaching herself to stitch with the sewing machine, and she did a bit and it went wrong, and then she stopped, and she went into low drama. I can't do it, and I could see it very clearly. And so she came and she stood next to me and she tried to hug me, and I could see, and I was actually getting quite angry because I could just feel this anger in me rising, saying, and then I noticed it and I was like, okay, the part of me just wants to kind of push her away. And I didn't, and it's because I didn't want to rescue her. And so it was this unconscious, like, oh, I can see that you're being a victim right now, and if I do it for you, because that's basically what she was saying. She said, oh, I want someone to do it for me. And I said, okay, well, who is that someone? And and she said, well, I don't want her sister and I don't want my dad. I want you. And I said, well, I don't want to do it. And it was at that point where I became the conscious arsehole. I said, I don't want to do it. And she started crying a bit, and then she was really like, oh, but I want you to do it. And I said, I don't want to do it. And I just stayed with that, and that was it. And and then she went through the tears, and I was ready for maybe a bit more of a battle in the conversation. But but eventually I was busy with something else, and before I knew it, she was back at the sewing machine and she'd finished it. And so really, it's, as again, as you do this more, there is a need, and it's not always about being the adult, but you're still being the adult because you're being the child in that situation consciously. It's not an
Mm,
unconscious reaction. So
mm.
you're really saying, I'm not going to be the grown up right now. I'm choosing to come down to this level and say, no, I don't want to do this. And and you don't always need to know why. Sometimes there's just an instinct that says, we just need to have this interaction right now. It needs to spark something. And really what happened is when I said no, she was sad, she cried, but she was also really angry. She's angry because I didn't save her. And that was her anger that then drove her to do it herself. So this is the conscious anger that I was talking about, that our, our anger also has the ability to create. It's our ability to do something.
Mm. In actual fact, when you were talking at the very start of the call about how women in particular aren't encouraged to be angry, I immediately wondered whether that was because anger is productive and society doesn't necessarily want us to be productive. But there you are. That is my like conspiracy theory feminist angle on it.
Yeah. Well, you might be pretty accurate, I think. And the fact that we came back, and your instinct that you didn't say is exactly where we ended up.
Exactly. It sounds to me like what you've been saying all the way through this is that anger, when it comes to feeling it and expressing it, is all about choice and control, and that through control you're able to choose how you then express that anger, and when and to whom, and what your outcome and what your motivation is. Because when you were talking about the 333, I was thinking that from my perspective, I don't get angry very often, and when I do, it's a very in the moment thing. I mean, I think that is generally what anger is, right? It's a very kind of, it's a flare. Now, to me, if I tried to access that in a kind of scheduled way later in the week or whenever, I think I would really struggle to find it. Like, it's almost like it has to be there in the now. And then when it's not there, I'm not sure I would be able to find it again.
Yeah, and that's really where I was when I first started as well. It was really just because my anger was so reactive, and I wasn't sensing it at the low levels. And so low level anger is not really shouting and screaming. Low level anger is really just that I I want I want to eat a cookie right now. I want to drink a glass of water right now. So your low level anger is also telling you what you want moment by moment. But how often do we just not even know what we want because we're not connected to that low intensity anger? And really your anger is your clarity. It's like when you have it at the low intensity, it's your clarity. It's giving you feedback. I
Absolutely. I think
Yeah.
one thing I've learned so much from my life coaching is that our emotions really are signposts. And if we're not aware of what they are, if we can't identify what it is we're feeling, let alone allow ourselves to feel it, it's so difficult to find our choices because we don't really know what we're wanting if we don't know what we're feeling about what's happening around us. And some of the most important work I do with my clients is just getting them emotionally literate, like it's crazy that I have clients my age, so nearly 50, and still if I say to them, how are you feeling right now, I get fine or tired or a bit stressed or maybe a bit nervous, and then underneath that it's just a blank. And just as you said, when I asked about how you actually schedule in accessing your anger, I think what you were saying was that it takes practice, right? It takes
Mhm.
practice. It's like, taking the same route again and again. After a while you understand what that route is because it's worn in. And it's the same thing with emotions. It takes practice to know what you're feeling, and I'm guessing similarly it takes practice to then, in these scheduled 333 moments, it takes practice to mine down into your inner rage that's always there. I'm guessing you're implying that it's always there bubbling away.
Yes, it is. And it doesn't have to be a really high intensity. And another way is also to access it through something called a rage club. And that's really an online training series, which I've been through 4 times now, and I'm now holding space for. And it's a space to really train, practice, reconnect with your conscious anger, and really also be clear of your unconscious anger, your emotional anger. And that's the part, it's the emotional part of your anger that's the destructive part, and it's the conscious part of your anger that is the creative part. So it's really this movement from destruction to creation.
What about people that really struggle to access anger? And I work with clients like this, and I've met many people like this who really just they've been so attuned to blocking it out or subduing it that it ends up becoming really almost impossible for them to find, or a very, very scary prospect to open up that particular Pandora's box.
Yeah, and I can relate to that as well, that it is scary. And you really start with just going slow. You don't have to go fast. And so there are exercises. So one of them is where you take a towel and you would roll it into like a tube, and then you hold it out in front of you and you start twisting it. And this is a really good practice to start feeling the energy of your anger moving through your bones. And so there's also another discovery that's been made through lots of research in this context, that possibility, that Rage Club comes from, which is possibility management, is that we have four. We've talked about this before. The four primary feelings: sad, mad, glad, and scared. And each one of those has a resonance tissue. And so anger lives in your bones, your sadness in your soft tissues, your fear is in your nervous system, and your joy is in the cell membrane of every single cell in your body. So that's really, but what happens is when we have things like our emotional anger and we're not allowed to express it, we unconsciously put our anger in we store it, we pack it in different parts of our body. And so another part of this is allowing yourself to put it back into the bones where it belongs, and also to reconnect with it. And so, yeah, this practice is a starting point.
For anyone listening who is thinking, well, that's all very well and good, but actually emotions live in the brain, I can direct you to a really interesting book by a biologist called Candace Pert, who wrote a book quite a few years ago now I think it's called The Molecules of Emotion. And she actually has proven that our emotions change our cellular structure. They actually change us on a biological level. And because before I read that book, I was very much, well, no, it's the brain, it's all in the brain. But actually the brain and the body are hugely linked in ways that we're really only now discovering. So this idea that certain emotions may live in the nervous system, the soft tissue, the bones, actually is not that outlandish. It's something that science was slightly behind, right? Our intuition that actually there are bits of us where we feel this thing, these emotions.
Yeah, and you might have heard of the Heart Math Institute as well, which really talks about. Have you heard of them? They've done a lot of work on the heart, and actually their discovery is that it's the heart that senses first and then sends the signal to the brain, which really throws science off.
How amazingly intuitive that for all of those years and years we've talked about the heart as where the emotions are, and then the last 20, 30 years we've all moved to the brain. Now we're all moving back to the heart again, which was where intuitively we always felt it was, right? In the chest here.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell us about the Rage Club then, because is it that it would be really good for people who are already on this journey of discovering anger, or would, for those people that I described who it is actually really quite scary and almost traumatic feeling to think about anger and to think about releasing it, would it be appropriate for them, or is it maybe for people who are a little bit more on the journey and feeling more comfortable with finding their anger?
I would say it's really for anybody, because it's really this. It's I've done it 4 times, and every time I've started like it was the first time, because it's really rediscovering and reconnecting with parts of you. And the first time it was very scary because I just didn't know what to expect. I was really, and I had no reference point. I hadn't watched any videos. I didn't know anyone who'd done it. I'd simply seen one line which said, "I'm holding space for a rage club. Message me if you would like to join," on a group that I was in. And I had just lost my mum, and it'd been 3 months, lots of different emotions coming up, and I'd been through a lot of sadness, and then I was coming into this space of realizing that I was also being very destructive in my relationships. I was more irritated with my children, with my partner. It was, yeah. And so when I saw that one sentence, it really just felt like hope, because I was at this point where I just didn't know what to do. I tried a few things, and they weren't really working anymore. And so this was, yeah, something different. And
Now you've set one up for yourself.
Yes, and I've done 4. I've been through 4, and I've been through the training to hold space to take other people through the journey too. And it's because it's been so transformational in my own life that I really, yeah, I'm taking a stand for it now. And it's really scary. It's really scary to be here talking to you about anger. I even wrote a Facebook post the other day to say I'm angry, and the whole thing that it's not okay for women to be angry. And it was so scary to put it out there and to say, okay, I'm going to talk about the thing that no one wants to talk about.
Well, I'm
That's
very
what I'm
glad you
taking.
have. And I'm very glad you've come on and shared with us that it's okay to feel these things and express it. So where can people find your Rage Club if they're sitting there going, okay, the towel's not doing it for me. I want to be sharing this with a bunch of strangers. So do you want to let our listeners know where they can find your Rage Club and get in contact with you and see what it is, how it is that you're holding space for us to express our anger? So do you have a website, something like that?
Yes, I have a website, and it's sareetapatni.org.
So that's SareetaPattni.org.
Yes. Yeah, it's a work in progress, but yes, the details of the Rage Club are there.
Perfect. Well, that sounds perfect. Well, you know what? This series has been so eye-opening for me. I think when we first started talking about doing a parenting series, it never occurred to me how much I personally would get from it, but also how much value I feel that it gives out into the world, because some of the things that we have talked about over the last few episodes have been things that I've not heard people talking about, like in public places. I've heard maybe sometimes, when you're at a play date, your children are playing and you're feeling very vulnerable, and you talk to the woman sitting next to you and you open up about some stuff. Every now and then you get those kind of occurrences, unfortunately too rarely, but I've not heard it being talked about in such a lovely open way. And I really hope that people listening have felt in some way validated, that they're feeling these things and it's okay, and that there are these alternate ways of navigating emotions with your children.
Yeah, and for yourself as well, because really the children go through it, and so do we as mothers, as parents. So yeah,
Fellow
and
travelers, right, on a boat.
yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's
We're all in
always
it together.
exactly. It's always the image I always use with my children, is that when you're home educating, it's like the three of us on this boat bobbing around, in the sea, trying to work out where you're going, trying to navigate the storms. But actually, in lots of ways, it's a lot bigger boat. There's a lot of us on that boat all together. It's just sometimes you can't see all the people who are around you holding you. And I think sometimes in home education, you can feel quite isolated, which I know is something we've also talked about. But actually, there are just like thousands of people around you. It's just a case of finding them and reaching out and connecting with them. And it's been a real pleasure to be able to connect with you during this series. So thank you so much, Sareeta, for coming on and talking us through parenting.
Oh, thank you, Eleanor. I've really enjoyed our conversations.
Bye, Sareeta.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's Home Education Matters podcast. See you at the next one. Have a lovely day.